Welcome back, both of you. We are now in the section 2 part. Our co-author, Dr. Paul, will be read today, especially, and let's do section 2.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm interested to see whether or not this black silicon technology has any applications in the field of downdraft energy towers that were proposed many, many years back, and by the group Engineers Without Borders when they went to Ethiopia and they applied a kind of thermoacoustic engine using thermoacoustic instability to develop a water and power at the same time through a system that used the natural forces that you find in very hot, arid places and climates. Is that something that black silicon can help to advance and make more feasible?
I'm not aware about this project, but I'm not sure black silicon has any implication related to thermoacoustics. It's basically taking advantage of radiative heat transfer. So basically absorbing heat or releasing heat in a passive manner, in an energy passive manner is the main capabilities. So is among the main capabilities. So I mentioned already the potential of having passive cooling during nighttime, which can help collecting water from the surrounding air through the condensation on the surface. There are other applications of black silicon, like any other black body. It can also contribute to produce light sources, infrared light sources. All what you have to do is to heat using electricity, like basically like a bulb of the lamps based on bulbs. So there is a heating filament which produce a certain spectrum of light based on the temperature that you are able to reach. And basically with this, it could be an alternative to produce infrared light at a reasonable price and very compact manner. So it's based on the reversibility of the radiative heat exchange. There is a famous physics law, which called the Kirchhoff's law for thermal radiation, which states that absorptivity is equal to emissivity, meaning that any highly absorbing material is also highly emissive material. It's also related to the black body emission, meaning that the surface, if it is black, it will behave better.
I see. I'm curious to ask you, given your expertise in raising a generation after generation of graduate students and doctoral students in many different fields and allowing them to pursue their particular interests in technology at the time and encouraging their entrepreneurial development, how can we improve science, technology, engineering, and mathematics education, the STEM education? What are your suggestions for that?
So my opinion is the following. I have now almost 40 years experience in the academia. So I saw many successive evolutions. So the most obvious is that in my time, we were using hard books. And then I experienced myself the evolution through electronic resources, meaning like a PDF version of the books and papers that are more accessible, especially with the advent of internet, which was a unique opportunity to spread the knowledge. And also from teaching perspective, we also know that e-learning and MOOCs became a standard, especially during the COVID pandemic. It was a kind of a worldwide standard to have teaching online. And a lot of platforms have been developed. It was an opportunity for many companies to develop new dedicated platforms. And nowadays, considering first the AI era, so with the example of ChatGPT, so it was discussed a lot among professors whether they should banish the use of ChatGPT by students because this would help them produce reports in a more efficient manner. But at the end, it seems that there is a consensus that you cannot fight against the progress. That if you look back to the past, calculators was not allowed in the exams. And then, through the years, it was a kind of unavoidable tools. And it looks like ChatGPT is following the same trend. And what else? Then there are other emerging technology like augmented reality, virtual reality, which are already used in some professional area like architecture and also in urban planning. So this, in my opinion, this could also help having more efficient teaching tools where something that cannot be easily described neither by a text nor by a video, an immersive experience in just to get a flavor about how it might look like in the field. So it might be a new degree of freedom for providing the next generation toolbox for teaching.
Yes, I have a friend at the University of Texas at San Antonio who's teaching mechanical engineering ostensibly, but many of the students are also taking courses in chemistry or physics or the other basic sciences with him. And because they enjoy video gaming so much, it's almost natural for them to approach STEM learning through artificial reality, virtual reality, and the metaverse. But back to your early influences, what initially sparked your interest in physics?
So it was not a coincidence. In my generation, the most lucky students had the chance to have a specialty in mathematics, physics, and chemistry. It's a kind of major, and usually they select, it's based on selection, based on the records. So I had the chance to go into this track. And eventually I had to select one topic among those three. So at that time, you need to consider 1983. Mathematics, at that time, it was not that clear that it might have a big impact. So this is not the case today, because it's obvious that today, if I had to revisit my choice, maybe mathematics would be a good choice considering the digital society. But at that time, I had to skip with this mathematics. Even I liked it, and I had to select among chemistry and physics. And eventually, I selected physics because I had this perspective in elaborating in semiconductor physics, where there were clear perspectives, not only in academia, but also in the industry at the cutting edge technology, because at that time, microelectronics, optoelectronics in the 80s was something really booming. And this was my project to continue after physics. So I had already this perspective of continuing, and that's what I did when I continued my study in France. So it was the first thing that I took is the master course on optoelectronics and microelectronics. And after that, I have this kind of specific specialization in MEMS, micro electromechanical system, which is a kind of non-purely electronics use of the semiconductor industry. And this was a really exciting experience and full of opportunity to do something new. You might know that MEMS had an impact on all those sensors that you can find in the smartphones, in the automotives that have a really useful functionality, including in security of the car. This airbag system, the ESP system, all based on sensors even when you park your car, they're full of sensors which helps you, assist you. So so all those are based on MEMS, which is basically a semiconductor chip, which is low cost, that can be produced in hundreds of billions pieces, and it's a niche compared to pure electronic devices like memories or microprocessors. So that was my my path, or the initial path.
So what brought you to France to begin your graduate studies? And how did you find the transition to the French academic and professional environment? I know that you grew up in Algeria, so maybe your first language is Arabic and French together, 1 and 2, or vice versa.
Absolutely. So Algeria was previously a French colony until 1962, and it got its independence in 1962. And there was still a big influence of this phase of Algeria history when I went to school. So even my parents at home were speaking French. And that was a kind of advantage for me when moving to France, having no difficulty of neither language nor even the society. So it was a natural transition. So, and what pushed me to select France for my study? So I think it's a kind of easy choice, not only because of the language proximity, but also the geographic proximity, just 2-hour flights from Algeria. And also I got a scholarship. I got a scholarship from the French government. So this scholarship was quite comfortable to offer me the 4 years study to study the master and PhD, to complete my PhD. And yeah, so, and also the attractiveness. At that time, France was among the big players in semiconductor industry at that time. So today, the landscape completely changed. I think you are in the right place, Paul, today in Taiwan for the semiconductor industry. So that's why I had to go to France to learn more about semiconductor physics, microelectronics, and optoelectronics.
Well, certainly Taiwan does have some advantages now in the semiconductor field. We've chosen some particular niches where we've decided to invest a lot of public resources. And most of the leading technologists in semiconductor physics in Taiwan actually pursued their studies in the US as well. So Dr. Morris Zhang for Taiwan Semiconductor studied at MIT and Harvard, and the same with many of our physics department chairmen and tenured faculty have completed their PhD in the US. We actually have an interesting visa in the United States, the J1 visa for foreign scholars, where we encourage persons who are publicly supported by their local government overseas to study for advanced studies in the US or for a degree, but then they're required to go back home for 2 years before they can reapply to emigrate to the United States, unless their field is one where they can apply for a waiver. So my godson, Norman Yao, who's a professor of physics at Harvard, his parents applied for that waiver and received it. And so even though his father's degree is in biostatistics for a PhD, ostensibly from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, but his dissertation topic is truth tables from computer science and mathematics and logic, and that have a lot of application in computer programming, for example, where you use truth table logic. So another question for you is, what are some of the highlights of your professional career in France, as well as the a little more specific, what you did in your 3 years in Japan? And konbanwa.
Konbanwa. フランチョのタリクと申します。よろしくお願いします。 So highlights of the highlights of my experience in France or my academic career. So
Yes.
yeah, so I occupied many positions including position at high level at the university. So including the position of Dean for Research at SCA Paris, the position which I occupied for 5 years. I even had a position of Associate Vice President of the whole University Gustave Eiffel, where I was in charge of international doctoral programs. I was also, by the way, I was offered the position of the scientific advisor at the Embassy of France in Japan, a position that I had to decline because it would pull me away from research, and I eventually decided to not join this position. So today and since 12 years, I'm acting as the scientific advisor of the chairman of SCA Paris. So this is my kind of contribution to the university's kind of appointment, which is not necessarily related to my personal research activity. So for research, so I can complement the answer if you would like to. So as I mentioned, I was lucky enough to have some very interesting PhD students, among them Dr. Bassam Saadani, whose ambition was to create a startup company. Since the beginning, this was his project. And after the completion of his PhD in optical spectroscopy based on MEMS technology, so it led to a very successful company that I mentioned already in the previous part of this interview. So 150 people working today, a subsidiary in the US and in many other countries, and a huge impact in agriculture and food industry to start with. So, what else? So you mentioned my experience in Japan. So in the topic of MEMS, I started my PhD thesis in acoustic MEMS. So I contributed to a kind of among the very first MEMS microphones, very tiny ones, small millimeter scale. It was in the late 80s. And in Japan, I moved to optical MEMS. And this was a kind of really big change in my career, because since that time, I continue a significant portion of my career devoted to these optical components. And I was lucky to work with a very famous professor in the University of Tokyo. His name is Hiroyuki Fujita. So he was now he's retired. He was at that time among the very top players worldwide in R&D in MEMS. And I worked with him during 3 years. So and I learned a lot from this experience. Including different ways of thinking, different ways of doing research that I learned during this experience in Japan, and that I'm trying to take the best of it when doing management of my own research team in France. It's not always easy, but sometimes it is effective.
The dual degree program that you mentioned was with Japan or with Singapore, or who were the partners?
It was in Singapore. After I came back from Japan to France, I had to change from Université Paris-Saclay to join back to SCA, which was the place where I took my PhD. So I got offered a full professor position. It was in 2002. And then just after I've been appointed, my first mission was to develop a dual master degree program in MEMS engineering with NTU, which is the university where I'm working now. And so I was in charge and directing this program for a period of 4 years. And it was a very special program. It was a kind of corporate program where we were enrolling students from all over the world. They were taking 1 semester in France of intensive courses, another semester in Singapore of intensive courses, and then an internship, ideally in a company or in an academic lab. And after that, they got their master degree and a dual degree, meaning a degree from NTU and a degree from France. And with that, it was very successful program. At that time, it was highly desired to have people training in this area of MEMS. So they had very successful academic careers. So yeah, that was with Singapore indeed.
What advice do you give to your young aspirants under your tutelage as far as pursuing these kind of international careers?
Maybe the landscape is moving very fast. The landscape is moving very fast. So what kind of advice is, yeah, it's very difficult question because now this has to take into consideration some geopolitical, important geopolitical changes that happened recently. So meaning that it has to be taken into account which country would like to build a collaboration with, because this collaboration might sustain for a long period. So it's important to make sure that this will be able to continue. So, so just to be frankly speaking, so now nowadays it's not obvious to establish collaboration with Chinese universities. So for some reason, it's a kind of either the academic professor themselves, they try to avoid because they don't see very clear long-term perspectives of investing in such kind of collaboration, or there are not written rules that from the kind of local governments, especially in Europe or maybe even in the US, that suggest to not elaborate too much on this kind of collaboration. So I'm frank here with this specific case. So, but maybe I did not answer to your question. So I would encourage any fresh PhD to have an experience overseas. It's becoming a standard, especially for those who would like to continue as an academia, to join as an assistant professor. Anyone who did not have a postdoctoral experience, especially in a foreign country, his chance of being selected are very limited. So this is among the requirements. And then I would encourage to keep the network with our previous students, because they can have their own very successful career, and we can benefit back from establishing collaboration with our own former students.
Well, I hope you'll continue to benefit as a shareholder and a stakeholder in Cyware Systems. I'm going to have to go do some research on that to see when they become a publicly traded company and everyone will be able to invest.
Yeah, I hope this will will arrive soon. It's not far for becoming a unicorn.
I'm also interested to ask you about your paper on bioparticle detection and whether that's similar to something you already mentioned, or if those bioparticles are different from, say microplastics or something.
Yeah, this is very interesting point. So it's also related to pollution. So both water pollution and air pollution. So if I take the example of air pollution, we have not only microplastics, but also we have pollen, which leads to some allergy. So this falls into the category of particulate matters, the so-called PM. So today, the standard for particulate matter contamination is just the size of the particle. Is PM10 is 10 micron, PM5 is 5 micron. but nobody knows about what is this particle, if it is a pollen or another bioorganism, or if it is a microplastic or something else. So in water, we have the same. So we have the microplastics in water, but we also have protozoa, we have bacteria, we have a lot of microorganisms that might be harmful for the health. And I had some contribution in this topic. So I co-supervised the PhD thesis with a colleague here in Singapore on the use of AI, deep learning techniques to analyze images taken of particles that were found in water and to try to identify protozoa. So protozoa are among the microorganisms that are big enough to take them in picture, and you can recognize them. Like you recognize the difference between a dog and a cat, you can, based on AI analysis of the image, deep learning, you can recognize between protozoa and even different types of protozoa. And that was demonstrated to be very effective. And by the way, just to capture those images, we use the kind of very well-known hardware which is used extensively in biology, which is called flow cytometry. The flow cytometry is used at high throughput to screen cells, including cancer cells. It was imported for the analysis of water to screen, actually to take in photos those protozoa and all particles in order to classify them. So, the ultimate objective was to get the proportion of protozoa, non-biological particles, and in the same way, a classification by size.
Recently, I edited a paper, and we went through, I think, 7 or 8 versions of this paper before it was finally accepted for publication last year, the end of last year. And the professors are at a nursing university in Taipei. But what they're, and it's artificial intelligence and machine learning, deep learning paper, where they're trying to develop something that has medical applications, but where they're the database that they're comparing is with very robust data is from the iron industry and the steel industry. And then the images they're trying to learn from have very sparse data. And so they developed an algorithm that allowed them to borrow from the sets of data where you have very ample data sets, and then how to create by this algorithm to create data to support the sparse data sets that we have for something like personalized medicine. So maybe through your cellular flow cytometry, you identify a unique cancer cell that's unique to some individual in some way. Then you want to pursue personalized medicine, you would be applying artificial intelligence and machine learning techniques where you may be using the image databases that are very massive, but that allow you to focus on something very tiny. And so that was very fascinating for me. When I look at the very impressive breadth of your scholarship and your students' scholarship under your leadership, I can see that when we say you're a professor of physics, really you're a professor of science and everything else, including mathematics now, because you come back to, in order to do the deep learning, you also have to rely on very strong mathematical skills in the computer science environment.
I used to say that I'm not specialized in anything.
Yes. Well, the term polymath is someone who's an expert in many fields. And so I'm certain the term polymath can apply to you and your scholarship. And I've enjoyed our discussion today. Hope you have
Thank you very much.
Hope you have a safe and happy trip back to France from Singapore tomorrow. When I was in Singapore, it was a number of years back, but I walked into the Carrefour market on Orchard Road. And from the airport, I went directly to the market. And as soon as I walked in, I was quite shocked because they had a huge display of very pungent durian fruits. And
Yeah.
almost knocked me out, almost fell down to the ground.
Thank you very much, Paul, and thank you very much, Sarah, for inviting me. And I hope you all the best, Sarah, for your long journey.
Oh, thank you so much to join our show, and thank you for your contribution as professor. Thank you, and Dr. Paul, thank you so much your contribution this able to this great interview. Okay, thank you.
Thank
you. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Safe travels. Bon voyage.
Thank you. Thank you.